Dude, I can't wait for this. I'm so excited.
Oh, man, this was, for me, one of my favorite research topics.
Arriaga, Arriaga 2, Bariaga, Aruglia, and Pizzozza. And they'll all be signing autographs. Welcome to the Sports Experience Podcast, everybody. I am your co-host, Dom DiTolla, with co-host Chris Quinn.
That's how that works.
We're ready to open wide for some soccer today, everyone. We're looking at probably the greatest team ever assembled in world history.
The 1970 Brazilian World Cup winning team. They are...
Dominant.
Dominant, yes. And without... Like, I love all these things, but they have so much stuff that happens that lead to them winning. And all these...
Totally.
Like, let's start it off. Let me just start it off real quick. 1950.
Okay.
Brazil hosts the World Cup.
Yeah.
They lose to Uruguay.
Yep.
And this sets in motion a feeling in Brazil that, because the thought was that they would become a world superpower after this World Cup, production would increase, industry would increase, and it actually decreases post 1950. So there's a very, it's almost like disheartened feel in Brazil until 58 when Pele plays his first World Cup and wins it at 16 years old. And they kind of get more into being Brazilian, which unfortunately leads to 1964 and a military dictatorship.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that kind of throws the society into turmoil and craziness.
Yes. So this is one of these dictatorships that we all know about that essentially arrests people for nothing and is murdering a bunch of people. So in Brazil right now, it's very, in 64, 65, 66, it's very insane. Yeah.
I mean, and it's a crazy time. South America at that time is seeing lots of coups, lots of dictatorships.
Lots of coups, yes.
Like Brazil is just another domino to basically fall.
Exactly. That is very correct as to the way South America was shaping out. And
you're losing to Uruguay. Well, it's not even Argentina. Get your shit. No, I'm just joking. Well, Uruguay's won a couple World Cups. Yeah. So
back then, Uruguay was the superpower, and I'll bring it back up. But in the 66 World Cup, Brazil goes out in the group stage to eventual champions England.
Yeah.
And this is when we see in Italy about a decade earlier, in Spain about a decade earlier, they make the conscious decision as governments, or whatever you want to say, people in charge, that they could really push propaganda through soccer.
Yeah.
So in 1966, when they lose, there's a huge backlash against the government and against this Brazilian soccer team, because they were like, it still had Pele, and they were like, oh, this is at the fault of us as Brazilians at the core. Like, there were talk about changes being needed to be made, and the dictatorship was just like, whoa, we're not a change.
Imagine being that brainwashed, though. Yeah. Like, I mean, I feel bad for him, but good God.
Well, that's all they had to cheer for, essentially.
See, now I cheer for Brazilian women's asses, good times at the beach, things of that nature. You still got that.
Thong era. I'm trying to just get you into the idea of where it was.
But I want Carnival.
So,
no, but you're right. You're absolutely right.
I want to bring up this. I brought up the 66 World Cup because teams made a conscious decision that, hey, if we go out and essentially take Pele off his feet, Brazil isn't going to do anything. Yeah, and that's what happens in the group stage.
Maradona and Messi, we've gone through this before.
We've gone through this before. And this is when the European game becomes very, very hard-nosed. The tackling gets really, really hard, and the refereeing gets really, really loose. So Pele says, I'm never going to play in the World Cup again after 66. He says it's too rough, and they're not protecting me the way they should.
Yeah.
Luckily, in like 68, Brazil goes out, and they're like, hey, you got to play for us, because he's like Maradona. He's their idol.
Only he's not taking ephedrine and likely cocaine.
No, it was actually interesting, because the only thing that he said was his what he did during his career was drink and womanize was Pele's whole thing.
There are worse things in this life than those things.
Exactly. So in about 68, 69, they are making this conscious decision because back then, just like time moved slower, I feel like.
Yeah, right.
But they're making this conscious decision that, hey, this team in this 1970 World Cup needs to be viable for our dictatorship. It looks better for us.
Could you imagine a dictator like giving a pregame speech, like just in military uniform, like, listen, you guys need to win.
Yep.
So we can keep oppressing people. And you too.
And you too.
Do it.
It was actually interesting. They asked Pele if he felt any kind of difference in 64, 65 when the dictatorship came in. And he said for himself, there was no difference. No, his life didn't change whatsoever. But for every single person that he talked to, they were like, oh, no, life is completely different. But obviously for him, it was...
Well, you get special treatments at like the Soviets and Soviet bloc countries.
Yes. They'd
treat their athletes nice, and then everyone would be waiting in a bread line.
Exactly. No, that's like literally what it was. So 68, 69, they finally start to put in these places where the government's like, hey, we're going to start injecting money into this team, essentially, or injecting, I don't even know how to put it, but just like they're putting their full weight behind them.
Yeah, they're injecting them financially, emotionally propaganda-wise.
Yeah.
Like, they're really building it up. It's like, hey, everyone, ignore all of your liberties being taken away. Go watch Pele.
Yeah. No, seriously. And I forget because there was a change in leadership at this point, and I wrote down his name, but I can't find it. It's like Michi or something like that. He takes over and is essentially puts, like I said, the weight behind the dictatorship behind the soccer team. They hire Saldinho. Mm-hmm. To a lot of people's surprise, because he actually came from the Communist Party that wasn't associated with the dictatorship. So a lot of people were like, whoa, that was kind of a weird hiring. But the reason why he essentially got it was because in 1959, he was a coach of this team and then retired from coaching and became a journalist for like a decade.
Oh, wow.
And the thought was because there was so much hate after the 1966 World Cup that the journalists would be more favorable towards this coach because he was an ex-journalist.
Oh,
that
yeah.
100% did not happen.
Well, of course not.
And Saldinho was, to say it mildly, insane.
That's awesome.
So Pele came out and he said, absolutely smart man, quick wit, doesn't know shit about soccer. There was an incident where the coach of Flamengo actually called him a coward in a radio interview.
Please tell me he challenged him to a duel.
He showed up at the guy's hotel with a gun.
Oh, yes.
And luckily the guy had gone to dinner, and then they calmed him down. So that's the mentality of this guy. And his friends will come out and say that he had a huge alcohol problem. So he would just sit on the bench and just pound cigarettes. And they said as soon as the game was over, he would essentially just get wasted.
So what you're saying is him and Wade Boggs needed to fly on the same plane together.
I'll tell you what, the only drawback, because I was reading this and I was like, fuck yes, Saldinho, I like that. The only drawback was he had a tendency to lie.
Oh,
so,
no.
And this is where we get to, people thought like he was completely untoward with the comments he has towards Pele. So they're doing all these medical tests that are kind of new for soccer players. They just weren't doing that before, like the fitness tests, all that shit. No. Pele gets an eye exam and his eyes are shitty. They've been like that his entire life. He said it's
not even recommended glasses.
No,
God.
But that's not the era. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know it.
He almost never had an eye exam. And then the coach comes out and he literally says, "So we're thinking about dropping Pele from the team because he's legally blind."
He's still fucking Pele.
And Pele's coming out saying like, okay, first off, I'm not legally blind. I'm just like have some poor vision. It wasn't even that bad.
Now I want to see Tony Bruin play soccer.
Oh, God, I wish. No, so I want to say this. He wasn't legally blind. It was like he was a little bit short-sighted. You know what I mean? Yeah. Uh-huh. It was what they said. And he almost doubled down on these statements saying like, oh, I'm going to bench him. He, isn't shit.
It's pretty much
Pele.
I mean, so come on.
That's what the nation was like. They were like, something needs to happen with this guy. And literally like a week after that, they fired him.
Good.
And he came out saying the best comments ever. He said, first off, he said that Pele was too short-sighted to track back and play defense. That was one of his statements, and people are like, all right, so he's not tracking back and playing defense no matter what. And then his second statement, because people were like...
That's like saying Tom Brady can't run a 40 fast enough.
Yeah, it's like saying Tom Brady can't fucking tackle a guy. It's like, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
And then he said their backup goalkeeper, Emerson, his arms were too short. And
I did read that, yeah.
They needed to replace him. And then people were just like, oh, this guy's insane. So they fire him. So I want to point this out, though. He does go 6-0 in the qualifying. And they actually play in front of the biggest audience to ever watch a soccer game. I think it was 183,000.
That's like a city
against Paraguay.
Okay.
And people were talking like the stadium was so packed that it was dangerous.
Oh yeah, it could have like just collapsed on itself.
And it was just, but that's Brazil, baby. Brazil, regulations don't fucking matter.
Use Crestfield wax paper.
So they fire him for being an insane man, which
is great.
They bring in Zagallo, who was his
Mario Zagallo, yeah,
who was his assistant and his next in line. So a lot of things wouldn't change with him coming in.
But would the craziness stay?
No. So that was their big
perfect.
That was their big thing, was they were looking at this being a man with safe hands who had no allegiance to the dictatorship. So I want to bring up this guy. His name was Dario. He was the dictator's favorite striker, and Saldinho ended up dropping him, and a lot of people were like, oh, he got fired because he dropped whatever, and then other people were just like, no, he flat out got fired because he was talking shit on Pele. That was 100% the reason. Like the thing with Dario just wasn't a thing when it turned out to be. So when Zagallo came in, he brought in more, even though he had no association with the dictatorship, he brought in more military
friendly players.
No, more military friendly, almost in the organization was brought in. So they brought in this guy who was like a fitness coach for the Brazilian army.
Okay.
And this guy goes to NASA for like a fact-finding mission.
Okay.
Because NASA had just landed their man on the moon.
Yeah.
And what he came back and said was just like, the reason why the United States essentially were able to land a man on the moon was because everybody was behind it. And they put not only athletic experience, but scientific experience. Yeah. So he comes back and he changes their uniforms.
Yeah, because they used to be just blue and white, and then
Yeah,
and then they added the green and yellow to it, right?
And the gold.
Yeah, gold. Yeah.
And so now they're gold and blue bottoms, and they change it to where they like actually breathe. So they don't, when they get like bogged down with sweat, they don't weigh them down. So they did a bunch of shit like that. They, like 2 months before the World Cup, they changed everybody's sleep schedule, and they actually drove them to a higher altitude because in Mexico it's higher.
Yeah, of course.
So they were like one of the only teams to really train their team like we see essentially teams getting trained now.
That's so awesome though, because this stuff isn't like cheating. It's just like, yeah, we're going to get an edge wherever we can find it, and we're going to this is a team effort, you know?
Well, they felt like in 66 they were outmatched physically, and a lot of the thought was Saldinho thought that they would get essentially like stronger, like they would play more physically players, but when Zagallo came in, he was just like, no, we don't need stronger players. We just need our best players.
Not only our best players, more physically fit players, more swift players.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's where we see, because essentially the team was already built.
Yeah. He's like Larry Coker in Miami. We're just giving you something. Don't fuck it up.
But the big thing that he did was bring in Roberto Rivellino. Rivellino. I'm sorry, I was trying to read his name. And this is, so for the time, you essentially, and this is for all national teams, you would essentially recruit from 1, 2, or 3 clubs. In Brazil, it was Santos and Botafogo. And they pretty much made up 90% of the team. But when Zigo came in, he was like, hey, we're going to bring in these Corinthian players. And essentially, because people were talking shit because these players you were bringing in were all almost identical to Pele, almost all identical to Gerson, who were their stars. And they were like, why are we bringing in identical players? And
you can never have enough good players.
Well, his quote, and I absolutely love it, is what this team needs is great players. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
And that was it. And we see that this team is talked about the last team to win a World Cup before formations kind of become stamped in. But I feel like the players of the team were so understanding with each other that their formation was interchangeable.
Hey everybody, just want to take a quick break to let you know that our Sports Experience podcast is brought to you by Engle Studio here, and they're here in Tucson for all your recording needs.
Yeah, you could play a guy at multiple different spots. If you're all good, you'll find a way to get in the lineup. Yeah, or whatever they call it in soccer.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah.
So he brings in. Sorry, I'm trying to read my little notes here. He brings in Rafinha, and the critique was that they were too similar, but what happened in the practice leading up was Pele, Grisson, and Carlos Alberto, who were the old guards.
Yeah, Carlos Alberto was like their captain, I had read.
And they were called the Cobras, so they are essentially the old team. They went to...
just like dodgeball.
Yeah, they went to Zagallo, and they were like, hey, we should be running this pretty much freewheeling formation.
Yeah.
And the reason why Zagallo was so ready to accept it outside of their old coach, Saladinho, was... he had played with Pele in 58 and he had played with Pele in 64, in 62. Mm-hmm. So he was essentially a player on this Brazilian team that understood like, hey, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, they figured it out almost.
Yeah.
For a better word.
Yeah. The players figured it out, not as opposed to, I guess, the coach, you know what I mean?
And the coach was like, yes, you're all awesome.
Yeah. And that was the big thing was people were asking where these players are going to play because they all played up the middle through their clubs. And it was so perfect putting Rafinha on the left and essentially moving leaving Carlos Alberto as the attacking right back. And you could see in these, if you watch the formation, they switch right. And everybody switches over when Carlos Alberto goes up, and then they switch left when the ball starts going to the left. And you don't see that much in this era.
No,
and that's the big thing is they can play multiple positions and they can switch at will, essentially.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So let's get into the actual World Cup.
Because this is where it happens.
I've been building it up.
I love those coaches' stories. Oh, man, that was great.
Yeah, Well, it's interesting because he gets fired, I think, 2 months before the World Cup.
Oh, my God.
So that's what's rare about this, but was what was needed for this Brazilian team.
Oh, totally.
Because we see them going into this World Cup in Mexico, they were looked at as they weren't going to get out of the group stage again.
Yeah, and, I mean, they very well could not have.
Well, Pele was thought to be too old.
Yeah.
The team was thought to be not gelled, and
coaching change.
the fan base wasn't behind them.
Oh, really?
This was something that I found so interesting was Brazilian fans said they went to the World Cup to cheer against Brazil because they hated the dictatorship so much. And when they got there, they kind of made the realization like, we can't cheer against Pele.
We're watching greatness here,
and that's why the dictatorship kind of takes soccer under their wing because it does work in a brainwashing way. It does work.
The ball went in the goal. Oh, maybe the government won't break into my house.
Yeah, maybe my cousin's murder wasn't that bad. So first off, they play Czechoslovakia, who's no longer a nation anymore.
Not even a country.
And Pele has one of these things.
Oh, yeah.
It's so interesting because this Brazilian team, a lot of the things that happen in the tourney, pre-tourney, have nothing to do with like goal scoring. It's almost like it's like the art of it.
Yeah. I wrote it down. Something, what was it? Hurricane. Joga, I think it's Joga Benito, play beautifully.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know Portuguese, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I know Pele.
Yeah. Well, in this first game, Rivinho had one, Pele had one, and Jairzinho had one, which...
Hurricane.
The Hurricane. Or he had two.
Yeah, so they went 4-1, yeah.
This is when everybody kind of makes the realization, like, oh, this is kind of a good team. This could be a team that go on and win. And then they pretty much have what everybody feels like should have been the final or semifinal, which is them in England.
Yeah.
England coming off winning their 66 World Cup and beating Brazil out of the group stage.
And what's his name? Bobby Charlton on this team?
Bobby Charlton, Bobby Moore. This is that England team that was fucking great. And they meet up against this Brazilian team who just outplayed them. There's this absolutely beautiful play by Pele to lay the ball off to Jairzinho, who, I want to bring this up, I'll probably bring it up again, who's the only player to score in every single World Cup game.
Which is amazing.
It was so
Even
great.
though this is a limited format, it's still amazing.
Yep. So Pele gets the ball in the middle about where the penalty spot is, and he drops a blind pass behind him to Jairzinho, who's essentially sprinting up from like half. One of the greatest quotes was, "I knew the ball was going to be there because Pele had seen me a million years ago coming up." So like,
oh man,
he was so confident that he was going to, because he was blind to what was happening behind him, but he just was so confident that he was going to be there that he just laid it off.
That's amazing.
And that's what led to them beating England. And essentially what people were saying was just like, the winners of this team is going to make it to the final.
And well,
there you go.
Ended up doing, but they beat Romania the next game 3-2.
Romania, what people don't really know about this Romania team was they were really fucking good.
Yeah.
It was really an interesting group stage here where Czechoslovakia was really good, England was really good, and Romania were really good. So this is like, they call it now the group of death.
Yeah.
This is essentially what that was back then. Pele gets 2 in this game.
Yeah.
Of course, Jairzinho gets another one because he gets one every single game.
Scoring all the time.
Well, it's if you go back and watch these group stage games, they are it's such an iconic memory of essentially soccer. So let me bring up what 1970 means. It's the first time that we have satellites
TV,
broadcasting. Yeah. So it's the first time we have them broadcasting all over the world, and Brazil is essentially putting on this show that everybody has read about, but nobody has seen.
Yeah, it's just like Brazilians are good at soccer. Well, I've never seen it before.
Exactly.
Now you can.
Now you can. Nobody's even met a Brazilian, so how would they know? And they have this iconic, what we brought up, this iconic gold shirt with the cobalt blue pants. And people were talking about how just readily identifiable it was. And it just like everything that got put into this Brazilian team was correct outside of the dictatorship.
Yeah, and the dictatorship can go, look how awesome our soccer team is. Everything's fine back at home.
That's literally what he does when they get back. It's brutal. Just I guess I'm Chrissy tangent. Just to give a little tangent here, he essentially takes credit for this World Cup. I forgot his name. I think it was Mitchie. Takes credit for this World Cup, and in all of the interviews, he's referred to as the murderous dictator. And it's such a great little thing that's essentially what his title became, because he was out there just killing people.
Killing it, literally.
Killing it. All right, so they get into the quarters against Peru. Peru is not a very good team.
No.
They're okay, but they're not like the teams in the group of death.
Yeah.
So they go on and win 4-2.
Yeah, it looks like Rivellino, Tostao scored twice, and then Jairzinho.
Yeah.
There it is.
It's tough, and I feel like if people are talking shit on our pronunciation, it's tough to get your head wrapped around these words that we've never said.
And everyone has one name. It's McLovin and Superbad, but they're all really hard.
That's what I love about this era in Brazilian football is they essentially Madonna all of their names, because they have 4 or 5 names, which is normal for Brazilians, But they're like, no, we need to be, like I said before, readily identifiable. And this 4-5 guys in front, 4 guys, and then Carlos Alberto, they're just so identifiable. They're just so like everybody can be like, oh shit. Like there's Pele and there's
Dude, I can't wait. I can't wait for this soccer team to start just having symbols as names like Prince.
Oh, that would be the best. Just like there he goes. Who? The the squiggly guy.
Yeah, squiggly, ampersand.
Ampersand. Yeah. Oh, that would be the shit.
But so they play Uruguay in their next game,
and I touched on this.
Yes,
touched on this in the 1950 World Cup where they lost to Uruguay, and it demoralized the country.
Yeah.
They play Uruguay in the semis, and everybody's nervous.
Yeah, because
they know.
Big bad Uruguay is back.
And Brazil and Uruguay are the only two, at this point, multiple World Cup winners. They both have 2.
South Americans, they share a border.
And right off of the bat, so I think it's like the 19th minute, Uruguay scores an almost identical goal from the 1950 World Cup. And you can see the Brazilian fans and their side almost deflate. Like, oh shit, here we go again. And then fucking Pele literally turns the game on its head. Mm-hmm. And this is why I have to say because they end up beating him 3-1. And I think he has a bunch of assists in this game is what it was.
He does, yeah.
Is the play that he has is so much, it essentially is what soccer is to become.
Yeah.
So this is what we were talking about with like Pistol Pete and all these guys who are 10, 15, 20 years ahead. Yeah. And he was for 2 decades essentially ahead of the game. But what I feel like was so revolutionary was injecting your best players and letting them figure it out.
Because they're the best.
Because they can, exactly. So they beat Uruguay, and they essentially, it was so funny because they were talking about it beating Uruguay. They were like, even though Italy's in the finals and Italy is a soccer powerhouse, they had so much confidence coming off of that Uruguay game that
you get the monkey off your back. Dude.
Exactly.
That is like it's like when Steve Young beat the Cowboys in that NFC Championship. Like, the Super Bowl was completely moot at that point. It's like you get that monkey off your back, you're fine.
And they were talking about it because it's
like anticlimactic almost.
Yeah, well, this group of players essentially grew up and were impressionable young kids in this 1950 team, or their older brother. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's this era. And they said like it was essentially redemption for all of their parents. That's what was
that's what's on their backs.
Yes,
it's crazy.
That's what was so great because their parents were the ones that felt this 1950 World Cup, and they felt like, oh shit. That's why there was so much relief. That's why there was so much joy around this win against Uruguay.
So many people the dictator didn't murder that day.
Oh my God. No, he was still keeping up his averages. That's got to give it up to the dictator.
Up those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers.
Those are rookie numbers. All right, so we get into the final against Italy. And
they're playing at Aztec Stadium in Mexico City. Super high altitude, badass venue. Wasn't that the one where Hand of God deal happened a little bit later? Yeah.
Well, like I had brought up, that World Cup wasn't ever even supposed to happen at Mexico. It was supposed to happen in
Colombia.
Yeah.
But we all know about Colombia.
Exactly. So I want to bring up the high altitude and the high temperatures.
Yeah.
Because this was, I think, the first time that they were playing in high altitude. And I feel like Brazil was one of the only teams that really trained for it.
Prepared, yeah.
So they were talking about this being the last World Cup with space.
Nice.
So they were so not in, because they were in shape, obviously, but they weren't in professional shape to handle the altitude change, so much so that they weren't closing people down. And they were essentially letting this Brazilian team pass
run
around.
all over them, yeah.
And like they were saying, like there hasn't been a better team set up for a World Cup like this.
That's awesome.
I know, and that's why I love this Brazilian 1970 team. So
because guess what? They're like Parker Lewis. They can't lose.
They can't lose. So they end up beating Italy 4-1.
Yep.
Pele has one. Gerson has one. Jairzinho has one because he has one
yeah.
every fucking game.
He has one every game.
And then Carlos Alberto has what people think of as...
Oh, yeah.
So this is like we were brought up in the Maradona episode, Maradona's goal after the hand of God is looked at as like one of the greatest goals ever. This is a lot of the time the goal that it's compared to.
Nice.
Because Maradona's was the individual effort. This was the Brazilian team absolutely slicing the Italian team to pieces.
Oh, God.
And it's brutal because people were saying like other teams would have held the ball and been more conservative. And Brazil was like, the only way we need to go,
the only way they know how to play.
Yes, is go forward. And that's what they did. And if you want to look it up, Carlos Alberto's goal is so...
Yeah, I did watch that on YouTube.
Oh my God, it's
really
so good.
But it's funny because they're playing Italy, and because I was researching this World Cup, they had played, I guess, the game of the century. I had read the game before against West Germany.
Yep.
Where like it's not overtime, extra time, right?
Yeah.
There's like a flurry of goals from both teams at the very end.
Yeah, that game's actually really interesting. The other semifinal.
Yeah.
That's why this World Cup is looked at as one of the best.
Yeah.
Is it has the Brazilian team, but it has this Italian team, like I said, that was a soccer powerhouse, but they met this Brazilian squad and they were helpless.
Yeah.
Like it's this Brazilian squad was so much better than it's the competition. It's really, 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 I love this 1970 Brazilian squad.
Oh, for sure.
The thing about the Italians, they had their two best, and this is what reverberates to what Brazil did. They had their two best playmakers, and they were essentially sharing time. Like how they used to do with quarterbacks. They felt like they couldn't put both of their center midfielders in at the same point. So one would play the first half, the other would play the second half. If the guy in the first half was having a great game, he might stay on. And people were saying that was the biggest mistake that Italy made, was not throwing all their great players on the field. And it reverberates.
Do you know what the dream team is? I don't think those guys were playing in position all the time.
Oh, I love that.
God.
Jordan.
Oh, totally. I don't know where Angola is, but I'm going to beat them by 50 or whatever Charles Barkley said.
Charles Barkley has some of the best quotes.
Oh, totally.
So they win this World Cup. 1970 victors. Like I said, the dictatorship essentially takes responsibility for it, which is
hilarious,
it's
disturbing,
and
and sad.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Let me add that
Hilarious.
too. Just the gall of some people.
And a lot of people ask Pele to come out against him, and he constantly says, I have nothing to do with politics. Stop associating soccer with politics. That was his stance. And a lot of people are like, we can't.
Yeah. They're making it about politics. I just want to play soccer, man. Fuck.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to get into this ender, this little Chrissy tangent that I got.
There
So Brazil won this third World Cup.
First to win three.
Uruguay had two, and they were given the Jules Rimet.
Yes, the trophy.
And just anybody that wants to know how the World Cup got started, Jules Rimet, he was served in World War I. After World War I, he said, I never want nations to war again. They should be warring on a soccer pitch. Let me try and make this essentially soccer tournament to where nations could battle each other and people don't die. Exactly. So that's why the World Cup was invented. They gave him this trophy for if you win. And they said that after the 1970 World Cup, they were going to change it to the World Cup trophy. So Brazil essentially could have this trophy forever. And it's the one that they've had since the beginning. And then in 1983, they were showing it, and a full-on, like when you think of a full-on like bank job,
no way.
Type
like Ocean's 11 type shit.
Type of gang came in and stole it, and they have no idea what happened to it. So there's it never resurfaced. They don't know if it got melted down. They don't know if it's in somebody's private collection.
Holy shit. Could you imagine owning that?
I tell you what, we might do a podcast on it because there's all kinds of other fucking crazy stories associated with it. Like it's cursed, it's whatever. It's like the ring from Lord of the Rings almost. They need to bring it back to Brazil. One more quick thing. Pele, won his third World Cup. He's the only player to ever win 3 World Cups. I'm pretty sure he's the only player to ever win 3 World Cups.
Oh, that's legit.
If somebody else does, they won't do it across 3 decades, which is what he did.
Yeah, he did it in 50s, 60s, and 70s, right?
Yeah, 50s, 60s, 70s. And then Zagallo, I have to give it up to him because he's the first player to ever win a World Cup as a player and a manager. And
yeah, I did read that. That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of attention is given to Pele and a lot of attention should be given to these other guys, Zagallo, Rivellino, Jairzinho, and Gerson.
Tostão.
And the guy that I feel like, what you brought up, the captain, which is Carlos Alberto, who I feel like, for me, for you, you probably didn't know him. Now,
no, not at all.
Now,
no.
yeah, he's one of those guys that you should, but
yeah, it's like, oh.
if you're into it, you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I totally get it.
That's why I love doing these researches, though, because we just learned so much, and we hope that you all out there have learned a lot, too.
Yeah.
Reading Rainbow. All right, we're out of here. Hey, everybody. This is just a stock message at the end of every episode. We hope you enjoyed whatever athlete and or team that episode was about. Just want to say, give us a quick follow on all social media. We have a YouTube channel, the Sports Experience Podcast, and we're on Instagram, DiTolla Dominic, and myself, C. Quinn Comedy. So give us a follow all around. We're always recording right here at Engle Studio. Thank you all very much.